This is VOA Africa.
Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Monday, June 7th. Welcome to Africa 54. We continue to work remotely because of the COVID-19 pandemic. But what hasn't changed is our commitment to bringing you the latest and most important news from the African continent and around the world. This is today's Africa 54. After weeks of speculation on the death of Boko Haram leader Abubakar Shekau, the Islamic State West African province said in an audio recording heard by Reuters media on Sunday that Shekau was dead. Gloria So of Reuters reports.
The leader of Nigerian Islamist militant group Boko Haram is dead, a rival militant group said in an audio recording heard by Reuters on Sunday. The leader of the Islamic State West African province reportedly said that Boko Haram leader Abubakar Shekau killed himself with explosives last month after a battle between the two groups.
Shekau preferred to be humiliated in the afterlife than get humiliated on earth, and he killed himself instantly by detonating an explosive.
Boko Haram's leader has been reported killed on several occasions over the last 12 years. But two sources familiar with the matter confirmed the news came from ISWAP leader himself, Abu Musab al-Barnawi. It's also been confirmed by a Nigerian intelligence report shared by a government official and Boko Haram researchers. Political analysts say Shekau's death could lead to the end of a violent rivalry between the two groups, enabling ISWAP to lure over Boko Haram fighters and consolidate its hold on northeastern Nigeria. ISWAP was previously part of Boko Haram before it split off 5 years ago after it objected to Boko Haram's killing of civilians. In 2014, Boko Haram grabbed headlines worldwide after kidnapping more than 270 schoolgirls from the town of Chibok, sparking a global campaign for their return. Around 100 of the Chibok girls are still missing, and some are thought to have died in captivity. Boko Haram has killed more than 30,000 people, forced around 2 million people to flee their homes, and spawned one of the world's worst humanitarian crises.
Gloria So of Reuters filed that report. Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni on Sunday reimposed a strict lockdown to curb a surge in COVID-19 cases in the East African country. The new measures took effect Monday morning and include the closure of all educational institutions, suspension of church services, the shutdown of weekly open markets, and some bans on travel. Most of the new restrictions will be implemented for 42 days, after which an assessment of their impact will help the government decide whether to ease or prolong them. Last month, new infections started to spike, particularly among younger people, fueling fears that the country could slip into an out-of-control second wave. Uganda implemented one of Africa's tightest lockdowns at the beginning of the pandemic more than a year ago, but it was gradually lifted as cases slowed down. The East African country has so far reported nearly 53,000 positive cases and 383 deaths. As wealthy countries begin to reopen after securing vaccine supplies early, African nations are still struggling to acquire shots. But that might soon change as the West African country of Senegal begins to produce COVID-19 vaccines next year. We hear more from this Reuters report.
Senegal could begin producing COVID-19 vaccines next year under an agreement with Belgium's Universals. A source involved in funding the project and a company official told Reuters. It's part of a global push to channel money and technology towards production in Africa, which makes only 1% of the vaccines it requires. African nations are still struggling to acquire shots as wealthy countries start to reopen, and on a continent of 1.3 billion, only about 7 million have been fully vaccinated. Under the agreement, the Institut Pasteur in Senegal's capital, Dakar, would initially begin packaging and distributing vaccines produced by Universals in Belgium early next year. Universals hopes to move its production line to Senegal in the second half of 2022, the source said. And the company would train local staff so they could eventually take over. Universal's Chief Investment Officer, Kate Antrobus, said the Senegalese site would be able to manufacture a class of so-called viral vector COVID-19 vaccine. the type developed by Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca. It could then use that capacity for other viruses in future. Senegal's Institut Pasteur is the only facility in Africa currently producing a vaccine, a yellow fever shot, that is pre-qualified by the World Health Organization as meeting international standards. Donors, including the United States and the European Union, are lining up to help fund an expansion at the institute so it can make COVID-19 vaccines, the source involved in fundraising said. The European Union said last month it will invest at least €1 billion to build manufacturing hubs in Africa. Senegal, South Africa, Rwanda, Morocco and Egypt are among the leading candidates.
That report was filed by Reuters media. Burkina Faso's government has declared 3 days of mourning following an attack Friday night that left at least 160 people dead and another 40 residents wounded in the northern village of Solhan and Yaga province in the jihadist-plagued northeast, according to a government statement Saturday. The government described the attackers as terrorists, according to government spokesperson Hussein Tambora. So far, no group has claimed responsibility. The United Nations said Secretary General Antonio Guterres was outraged by the attack. Despite the presence of thousands of UN peacekeepers, attacks by jihadists linked to Al-Qaeda and Islamic State in West Africa's Sahel region have risen sharply since the start of the year, particularly in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. In Sudan, some 36 people were killed and 32 wounded in clashes in South Darfur, according to state news agency SUNA. The violence occurred between members of the Felata and Taisha groups in the area of Dafuk. A resident said the fighting Saturday involved a land dispute. Security has worsened in recent months in Darfur, despite the peace deal signed between Sudan's transitional authorities and some rebel groups late last year. A United Nations African Union peacekeeping force stopped patrolling on January 1st ahead of its withdrawal, with Sudanese national forces pledging to secure Darfur in its place. A conflict that intensified across Darfur from 2003 mostly subsided, but some 1.5 million people remained displaced, and outbreaks of violence have become more common since last year. Fashion icon Patheo left Burkina Faso, his country of birth, at an early age for greener pastures in neighboring Ivory Coast, with a dream to return home with a transistor radio and a bike. Instead, his dream surpassed his imagination. We get more from this Reuters report.
Celebrating 50 years, Patheo spans a career that has seen his uniquely colorful shirts and dresses become must-have for Africa's most famous leaders and celebrities, even Nelson Mandela himself. He's marking it with a glitzy show and the launch of a new high-end boutique in one of Abidjan's chic neighborhoods. It's hard to imagine that the man who designed the glamorous outfits once dreamed of having little more than a bicycle and a radio. When 20-year-old Patheo Ouedraogo left his village in Burkina Faso in 1969, his slender frame ruled him out of work in an Ivory Coast cocoa sector, but a chance decision to become an apprentice tailor set him on a new path. Patheo says his first break came in 1994 when South African singer Miriam Makeba bought 4 of his shirts as a gift for Nelson Mandela, who was the president at the time.
President Mandela wore Patheo in Paris, and a journalist asked him a question about the shirt because it was the first time a president wore a multicoloured shirt like that. Because at the time you had to dress like a white person. You had to be sober as if you were forced to be sober, or you would look like a third world person. That's how it was. And he was wearing this kind of shirt for the first time. He said, "It's done in Abidjan." And he did not know my name well. He said Patheo or something like that. And now everyone here in Ivory Coast has learned that Patheo dressed Mandela. Then, during the 3rd edition, people looted the shop.
That shirt sparked a rush of orders and sales, pushing him to the forefront of Africa's fashion scene almost overnight. Mandela was but the first African leader to adopt Patheo's work. He went on to meet and design clothes for many presidents. But Patheo says there's still more work to be done in order to develop a pride for African fashion amongst his important clientele, everyday African people.
We have not yet conquered the African market because Africans themselves are still adverse to wearing what is made in Africa. That's the real problem. We think that if we don't dress up like the people on the other side, we have less. This is the real fight today. We came into this profession to earn money, but today it has become a fight.
Reuters media filed that report. One of Africa's most popular televangelists, Temitope Balgun Joshua, popularly known as TB Joshua, has died at age 57. The Nigerian-born pastor was founder of the mega church Senegal Church of All Nations, which also runs the Emmanuel television station in Lagos. Associated Press reports that his death was announced Sunday by his church, but no cause of death was given. TB Joshua was known to make predictions and claimed to cure various ailments and to make people wealthy through miracles. Many African presidents, senior government officials, international soccer players, musicians, and other high-profile guests have worshipped in the church. Joshua is survived by his widow and 3 children. Prince Harry and his wife Meghan welcomed the birth of their second child, a girl, on Friday. Lily Diana Mountbatten Windsor was born at the Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital in California. The couple's first child, Archie, was born in 2019. The choice of name pays tribute to the Queen after a difficult year for the couple and the wider royal family. Lilibet is a family nickname for the 95-year-old British monarch. Buckingham Palace said the Queen, Harry's father, Prince Charles, and his brother and his wife, Prince William and Kate, were delighted with the news. Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson joined them in sending congratulations. Meghan and Harry announced the birth with a statement saying, quote, "On June 4th, we were blessed with the arrival of our daughter Lily." The statement said they remained grateful for the love and prayers they have felt from across the globe. Coming up, Kamala Harris makes her first international trip as U.S. Vice President to Guatemala to address migration issues. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Africa 54. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris left for Guatemala and Mexico Sunday in a bid to lower migration from the region. She is expected to focus on bolstering economic development and humanitarian relief and strengthening good governance and civil society. White House correspondent Patheo has this report.
Securing support for the Biden administration's goal of lowering the number of migrants seeking to enter the U.S. That is the purpose of Vice President Kamala Harris's trip to Guatemala and Mexico beginning Sunday, particularly migrants from the Northern Triangle countries, Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala. It will be her first foreign trip as Vice President.
I'll be meeting at the front leg of the trip with the President of Guatemala, Giammattei, and we have a lot to discuss. It is about what we need to do and can do together to both support the folks who need help in terms of hunger, the economic development piece, the extreme weather, and the impact that has had on their economy. But it's also about having very frank and honest conversations about the need to address corruption, to address crime, violence.
In March, President Joe Biden asked Harris to lead the administration's diplomatic efforts to address what they call the root causes of migration, including poverty and violence.
If you deal with the problems in country, it benefits everyone. It benefits us, it benefits the people, it grows the economies there.
The administration wants to reduce factors that are prompting people to leave their countries, so-called push factors. Harris is expected to address bolstering economic growth and humanitarian relief, strengthening civil society, and improving good governance through anti-corruption efforts. Analysts say the multi-pronged approach is the first major effort in decades by a U.S. administration to tackle problems that impact Central America.
Migration is one of them. The rule of law and governance is the second one. And a sluggish economic growth model is the third one. You also have climate change, which is becoming a much more persistent problem. And so, those issues have to be tackled one by one, systematically at the same time, but they are all connected.
On June 1st, the Biden administration ended the Trump administration's Remain in Mexico policy that forced tens of thousands of asylum seekers from Central America to stay south of the U.S. border until their claims were processed. The administration is under pressure to rescind the Trump-era Title 42 that allows border agents to immediately expel migrants because they potentially pose COVID-19 health risks.
The fact that the Biden administration continues to send people back into those same conditions is absolutely shameful, and the vice president can't meaningfully be engaging in those issues in the region unless she's also talking seriously with the other parts of the administration who are responsible for immigration policy and sending people back into those very same conditions.
Harris will also bring welcome news to the region. On Thursday, the administration announced plans to share the first 25 million out of the 80 million surplus vaccine doses it has committed to share with the world. Some of those doses, shared via COVAX, the United Nations mechanism to ensure vaccine access for low and middle income countries, will be given to Western Hemisphere neighbors. Patheo, VOA News.
Sunday marked the 77th anniversary of D-Day, when Allied forces stormed the beaches of France's Normandy region. Historians say the month-long battles that followed liberated Europe from Nazi Germany and gave the Allies the upper hand in World War II. VOA's Arashar Basadi reports how survivors marked the day.
They called our beach Omaha. Don't ask me why. I've never been to Omaha, the one in Nebraska, I mean. If it's anything like Omaha, France, you can have it.
June 6, 1944, D-Day. More than 150,000 American, British, and Canadian forces stormed the beaches of France's Normandy region, launching months of bloody battle. Experts say the assault changed the balance of power in World War II. Sunday, some 77 years later, some veterans marked the occasion publicly, even as ongoing coronavirus pandemic travel restrictions kept others, along with the families of fallen soldiers, from attending. In the English village of Alres, a group of Normandy veterans and relatives gathered at the unveiling of a D-Day monument called Vers-sur-Mer. D-Day veteran Sergeant Bernard Morgan remembers the invasion.
The thing I remember most was the sad sight of seeing so many dead bodies on the beach. They were mostly soldiers who landed early in the morning. Their landing craft had stopped short and they jumped into the water. Unfortunately, a lot of them were drowned because the kit they were carrying was so heavy and the poor lads had no chance. And it was the first dead body I'd seen, and it was very upsetting.
Morgan says he lost 3 men in Normandy, and wearing his medals, especially on the anniversary, reminds him of his fallen soldiers. Coronavirus restrictions limited the size of the crowd in Alres, but more than 100 veterans remotely watched the event, paying tribute to the more than 4,400 Allied troops who lost their lives on D-Day. Harash Arabasadi, VOA News.
As New York COVID restrictions ease, Broadway is hoping to draw people back to the theater while the movie industry is expanding its footprint in the Big Apple. Evgeny Maslov has the story, narrated by Anna Rice.
The coronavirus pandemic has caused a surge in demand for TV shows and streaming platform projects that can be enjoyed at home. And while the entertainment industry took a big hit from the pandemic lockdown, one New York studio has plenty of work and is expanding. Kaufman Astoria, one of the largest studios on the U.S. East Coast, has just added a new pavilion to the list of its existing ones. It's not Hollywood, but it's definitely growing.
We've been busy here at Kaufman, back since the early 80s. But what we've seen is as the streaming services came into play and more channels, we'll call it, wanted to have original programming, the need for original content production boomed, just like off the charts boom.
Located in Queens, Kaufman Astoria Studios has a long history. Founded in 1920, it is one of the oldest studios in the U.S. Paramount Pictures Studios used to be housed here until it relocated to California.
This was home to silent films, and as talkies came in, it was the Marx Brothers and W.C. Fields and Rudolph Valentino and Gloria Swanson. So it was the heyday, those glory days of Hollywood is what was done here at Kaufman Astoria.
The movie industry moved to Los Angeles in the 1930s because it was cheaper to work out west and weather permitted year-round filming. But New York is still home to lots of TV and film production.
People think, well, of course, Hollywood had become Hollywood by then and there was no filmmaking in New York, but that simply wasn't true. There's always been a steady heartbeat of filmmaking here in New York, even though a lot had shifted to LA and there were sort of peaks and valleys in New York. I mean, now, of course, nowadays, it's absolutely thriving. There's so much production here.
Kaufman Astoria Studios is where Sesame Street was originally filmed, as well as TV shows New Amsterdam and Nurse Jackie, and movies like Carlito's Way and Men in Black. And while vaccinations are beginning to allow people to get back out into the world, they are also still looking for the next binge-worthy show. And these expanding New York studios are working hard to keep up with the ever-growing demand. For Evgeny Maslov in New York, Anna Rice, VOA News.
U.S. State Department spokesperson Ned Price said the United States negotiating team is neither optimistic nor pessimistic that a deal can be struck in the next round of talks in Vienna to revive the Iran nuclear deal. As VOA senior diplomatic correspondent Cindy Sain reports, Iran says only minor issues remain.
The parties to the 2015 Iran nuclear deal have been meeting on and off in Vienna since April to forge an agreement to bring the United States back into the deal after the Trump administration pulled out, and to bring Iran back into compliance in exchange for the lifting of sanctions. The European Union is coordinating, and its representative sounded an optimistic tone, saying he believes an agreement will be reached in the next round of talks.
The sixth round will be the last one.
Asked if he shared that optimism, State Department spokesperson Ned Price was more cautious.
We are neither optimistic nor pessimistic about this. We're clear-eyed. We're clear-eyed about the stakes. We're clear-eyed about our objectives. And ultimately, our objective here is to ensure that Iran is once again subject to the most stringent verification and monitoring regime ever negotiated.
Iranian President Hassan Rouhani took a more optimistic view, saying that his country's main issues with the United States have been resolved, and only what he termed minor issues remain. But Center for American Progress's Brian Katulis says that view may be more rosy than realistic.
I think it may be a bit of happy talk to cover up the fact that there's a real distrust. I mean, they're trying at the talks to rebuild it. There's also the uncertainty about who will lead Iran at his level. So it's clear, sort of, because Iran is a dictatorship led by an authoritarian leader, the supreme leader Khamenei, and there's not much choice for the Iranian people in terms of these elections.
Katulis said there are several thorny issues that need to be resolved before the deal is resurrected.
Another sticking point is that the Biden administration has used the phrase a longer, stronger deal, which I think that's a long-term goal, not the goal for these immediate talks right now. But there are outstanding issues about access to military sites. There are concerns that the IAEA have raised in recent weeks about new information that has come up about Iran's past activities.
Aside from elections this month in Iran, experts point to efforts to form a new coalition government in Israel without long-term Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the helm as a possible factor in the talks. But Catulus believes this is not likely to have a major impact because there is opposition to a revival of the Iran nuclear deal across the political spectrum in Israel. Cindy Sain, VOA News.
Since the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic in early 2020, New York City's tourism industry has suffered, including its famous open-top sightseeing buses. VOA's Anshuman Apti has more.
New York City is considered as one of the top tourist destinations in the world, and New York City's open-top sightseeing buses offer a popular view. But in 2020, the number of visitors dropped by 2/3 due to the pandemic, and now the tourist bus industry is on the brink of collapse.
We all went either 100% down because of the closure. We closed between March and July, and since we have reopened in July, we have been trending about 95% below what was 2019.
The big bus tour company had around 400 employees in New York City. But by the beginning of 2021, only 20 remained. And even now, the international tourists who gave companies half of their total revenue are hard to find.
Before British come, because they love the snow, the weather, a lot of them coming in. But now, the COVID, there's no British tourists.
Tour bus companies are offering discounts and are complying with COVID safety protocols. At the moment, their customers are predominantly domestic.
We just want like a different perspective, you know. I feel like if you're on the ground versus when you're up above moving around, you see the city in like a different view we've never seen before, even though, you know, we live here.
I have my family too, so yeah, 4 people is a very good price for the hotel and everything on service.
The dire situation faced by New York City's tour bus industry also reflects the condition of the entire bus industry. Industry advocates say that the industry incurred more than $12 billion losses during the pandemic. The COVID relief packages issued by current and previous administrations allocated money for motor coaches, school buses and passenger vessels together, but did not directly help the tour bus industry.
We had hoped for $10 billion. We ended up with $2 billion divided among 3 different industries. And again, once that happened, our hope was that the Department of the Treasury here in Washington, D.C. would get that money out and distribute it fairly quickly. Well, it's been 3 months, and the Department of Treasury is still trying to figure out how to distribute it among the 3 different industries.
Tour bus industry representatives say with more people getting COVID vaccines and the weather warming up, business may pick up. But it may take a year or more to recover from the colossal losses caused by the pandemic. Anshuman Apte, VOA News, New York City, New York.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thank you for watching.